Hello and welcome to GCSE Home Learning. This is our first in the lesson series on development, and today our first lesson is looking at measuring development. Take a look at the image here. How developed do you think the country is where this picture was taken? Well, we can see he's selling some goods. I can see perhaps some sweet corn there. He's making some goods and he's selling them on the street. So he's a street vendor. I don't believe that he is paid excessively well for this job. I don't believe that he has security in this job. And by security I mean a contract which ensures how many hours he works, a contract which means if he's sick he will still get some pay. I think perhaps he is insecure, and this is what we call the informal economy. And it's likely that this is in a less developed country. Let's compare that with a job in one of the offices on the right hand side in a developed country. These are jobs that are perhaps in tertiary or quaternary industries that require knowledge and education, perhaps pay high salaries and give real job security. So I can see there is a difference in development from the country on the left to the right. How about this image? How developed would you say this hospital is? Well, I can actually see there are many professionals there. There are doctors, there is equipment, there are beds. So this is definitely in a country with some good aspects of development. However, I can also see there are people sitting on the floor. Perhaps there is a lack of space. Let's just compare it with another image. This image on the right, I can see even more equipment available to help individuals. There seems to be more space. Again, we have professionals working. If I was to make a judgment, I may say the country on the right has a better level of development. But these images require real detailed analysis to be able to make this judgment. The focus of our lesson today is to work out how developed a country is and how we measure that. Quick think. Which of these would you say is a good definition of development? Do you think development is the process by which a country improves its economic growth and basically gets richer? Do you believe development is the process by which a country improves the health and social conditions for people? So health and maybe education, quality of living. Or do you believe development is the process by which countries become able to vote for their own governments and have the right to free speech? Take 10 seconds to think about your answer to this question. Which of these is a good definition of development? Well, actually this was a trick question, because development, and when we're referring to development in the reference to countries, actually refers to all three of these processes. Development is about improving the economic employment conditions of a country and the wealth of a country. It is also about improving the social conditions, such as healthcare and education. It is also about improving political conditions, such as being able to vote and free speech. We could include environmental improvements as an aspect of development, but there will be a separate lesson on sustainable development later on. Okay, what I would like you to do for me to begin is write your lesson title in your notes, please. Here is your title, How Can We Measure Development? I would then like you to write your keywords. This is these here, development indicator and human development indicator. And I would also like you to complete the do now and the stretch. So we have here a do now on the right. What name is given to countries which are highly developed? See if you can remember this from your previous learning. Don't worry if you can't, because we will go through the answers. Second question there, and a stretch. You may want to pause this screen, take 2 or 3 minutes to complete this task. Okay, let's check our answers. What name is given to countries which are highly developed? We tend to use the words high income country, and sometimes you'll see more economically developed country, or that term is used less often these days. What name is given to countries which are developing quickly, recently? The phrase we've used in previous lessons is newly emerging economy. Countries like China, India, Brazil, which are developing very fast recently. You may sometimes see them called newly industrialized countries, NICs, or recently industrialized countries. Okay, in terms of a definition of development, we really need an answer that addresses economic, social, and political improvements, perhaps even environmental. So if your definition of development looks like this, well done. If not, fix it or copy down this definition so you have that in your notes. You may want to pause this video while you do that, and then we'll continue in 3 seconds. Okay, how can we measure development? This lesson today does relate to all GCSE specifications. There is some difference in how the specifications want you to look at development, but this lesson will cover all of those. If you are in AQA here, over on the right, we will answer all aspects of the specification. If you are with Edexcel over here, we will answer all aspects of the specification today, excluding political corruption. However, there is a lesson that will come on this in the future. And if you are with OCR down here, we will refer to all aspects of the specification except sustainable development today, but there will be another lesson in the future. Okay, you may have seen this before. As countries develop, the name of the country or the classification of the country changes. So we have the very poorest, less developed countries called low-income countries, the very richest, most wealthy developed as high-income countries, and those that are on the journey to development very fast are newly emerging economies. If we look at indicators of development, we can see how developed a country is. So for example, literacy rate. Literacy is how many people can read and write in a country. In a low-income country, we may expect the number of people who can read and write to be low, perhaps because they don't have many schools or access to education. Perhaps there are schools and education, but children are not able to go because they are busy doing other jobs such as collecting firewood, collecting water for their families. In a high-income country, you would expect almost everyone to be able to read and write. So literacy rate is high. The number of doctors. We would expect there to be a low number of doctors in a developing country. We would expect there to be a high number of doctors in a rich country as the government has the wealth to pay for many doctors. Enrolled in education. This is how many go to school. Again, as we've seen, in a low-income country, this might be low. In a high-income country, this might be high. Gross national income. So this is how wealthy the country is, how much money they have from all their sales of goods that they export to other countries, their manufacturing, and all the wealth and income that is generated in the country. So this basically is how rich they are. The GNI of a low-income country is obviously low, and the GNI of a high-income developed country is obviously high. These are what we call development indicators because they indicate how developed the country is. Infant mortality. Infant is children, mortality is death. This is how many children die under the age of 1 per 1,000 of the population. So if we are in a low-income country, we expect, unfortunately, many children under the age of 1 to die. Maybe because they don't have access to the right nutrition and food, maybe because they don't have access to medical treatment as easily as they should. In a developed country, we would expect infant mortality rate to be low. It is not usual in a developed country for babies to die under 1 year old. So these are development indicators. Okay, task for you, and we don't need to write this down, but this is for you to think or say out loud. On the left, we have a measure of development, a development indicator. So the first one is having access to safe water. This is the percentage of people who have safe water. In a high-income country, would you expect the number of people who have access to safe water to be high or low? Probably you would expect that to be high, because you would expect in a rich developed country people have access to safe water. What I would like you to do, look at each of the development indicators and decide whether you think they would be high or low in a high income country. Would they be high or low in a developed income country? I'm going to pause this video, allow you to think through those, and we'll check our answers together in 3 seconds. So press pause to work through these. Okay, birth rate. We would expect that to be low in a rich country. That's maybe an interesting one. You may have got that wrong, but actually in a rich developed country, many women are having education, they are choosing careers and not having as many children. Perhaps also they don't need as many children to work for the family, such as on farms. Death rate should be low in a developed country because there's medicine, vaccinations, access to healthcare, good nutrition. GNI is wealth, high in a developed country, lots of income, lots of wealth. Infant mortality rate should be low in a developed country. Life expectancy, how long a person should live, should be high in a developed country. Literacy rate, how many adults can read or write? Well, this percentage should be high in a developed country. And people per doctor, bit of a trick question here. There should be how many people per doctor should actually be low in a developed country. That means how many patients per doctor. So if I've got 2 patients for every 1 doctor, that's good because that doctor has all his time to spend looking after 2 people. A poor country may have many, many more patients per doctor, a high ratio, and therefore that doctor is very busy and maybe unable to treat that number of patients. So that's a tricky one there, but you may want to pause this video, reread the indicator to understand that. Okay, next task. What I would like you to do is organize the measures of development on the left into 2 columns in a table. So please write 2 headings, social indicators and economic indicators. Social refers to people, as we already know, and economic refers to money and wealth. Okay, apologies for my writing there. So let's do the first one together. Having safe water, that's about healthcare, so that would go under social indicators. Access to safe water is an indicator to measure how socially developed your country is. Birth rate, is that social or is that about wealth? You decide. You may pause this video, complete the table. There is a stretch here, and in 3 seconds I'll be moving on from this slide. Okay. You were asked as a stretch, what is the best way to measure development? You may have thought about wealth. It's common for people to think that money is the best way to develop, and actually many people think that the amount of money a country has does suggest they are very developed, because money can be used to pay for education, money can be used to pay for healthcare and other things. But there is a new indicator which helps us decide how developed a country is, and this is called the Human Development Indicator, the Human Development Index. This index is compiled by adding 3 things together. First of all, they look at the wealth of a country, how much money each person on average has in the country. They add to that how long people live. They add to that again how many years people have in education. And this gives a score on the Human Development Index. And the highest score you can achieve is a score of 1, and the lowest is a score of 0. So a country which has the highest wealth, highest life expectancy, and has the longest amount of years that people are in education would come out on top of this list at number 1. So just to confirm, the Human Development Index takes the level of wealth, the GNI per person, the gross national income per person, adds to that the life expectancy, how long people live, adds to that how many years people are in school, and gives a figure, a score out of 1. And in actual fact, Norway is the country at the top of this list. If we were to look at GNI alone, the United States is at the top of this list. However, when we add life expectancy and years in education, the United States slips down and is no longer at the top of this list. This is a good indicator because it adds in social indicators, so life expectancy is social, years in education is social, but GNI, the wealth of a country, is actually economic. So this indicator, the Human Development Index, actually includes economic and social indicators within one to give a score. So this is perhaps the best way to measure development because it includes economic and social indicators. So if you see a country with a high development index score near 1, you know that economically the country is developed and socially the country is developed. Okay, let's have a quick check. What are 4 areas of development that a country can make? Feel free to say this out loud. Don't worry if someone in the room is listening to you. They may ask you what you're talking about and that will help you learn. 4 areas of development that a country can make. Well, that could be social development, such as improvements in healthcare, economic, improvements in wealth, environmental and political improvements. What type of development indicator is life expectancy? So choose from the 4 above. That is a social development indicator. Number 3, what type of country would have a high infant mortality rate? So what type of country would have lots of babies dying? A low-income country, a very country that is developing very slowly. What 3 elements make up the Human Development Index? Apologies for the typo there. Human Development Index. And that was life expectancy, GNI per person, and years in education. So life expectancy being social, GNI per person being economic, and years in education being social. And remember, they are scored together to give a score between 0 and 1. Why might some people think the Human Development Index is the best development indicator? Well, because it contains both social and economic information. And in our next lesson, where we look at the limitations of these indicators, we will go a bit more into looking at the Human Development Index and seeing some of the countries that are performing really, really well. So that'll be interesting to see where the UK is in terms of its level of development. Okay, lesson 1. How can we measure development? Let's finish by answering a question to explain how we can measure development. So the first thing I need to do is name the 4 types of measurement that we would make. So there are 4 types. So I might begin by saying economic, environmental, social, and political indicators can measure development. Okay, give an example development indicator for each of these. So I might say these include economic. Let's do economic GNI. Let's pick a social one, life expectancy. And let's pick another social one, such as years in school. Now, what I'd like you to finish off with is explain why the Human Development Index is seen as the best. So I will begin with the HDI is the best indicator because, and that's for you to finish off. I've actually given you a huge clue in the answer already as to why the HDI is the best way of measuring development. Okay, this has been a bit of a whirlwind through development indicators. We will look a bit more detail in lesson 2. Do feel free to add in the comments below your answer to this question. I will give you a comment on that and then I will delete them. So that's worked really, really well in some of the other lessons where people have commented. I gave some feedback and then deleted that so that other students can try their answers from scratch. But do complete that answer, please. Look forward to seeing you in lesson 2 of development. Thank you very much.